How's everybody doing? Thanks for coming. I forgot about this light, but it's good because it makes me feel like there's a lot of people here. So thanks for coming today. We're gonna talk about kind of how brands and music and artists can kind of contribute to the world in different ways, and find like a nice little ecosystem where everyone's benefiting. I think there's a lot of talk here about music and brands, and it's been a theme that's very interesting to a lot of people. But I have three amazing speakers today to join me up here to kind of help tell some stories and give you guys like some things to think about in how music, brands can really contribute to making the world like a better place. I think it's a great goal to have, especially in the world and the climate that we're in right now. There's no reason why that can't be threaded together and really be a very useful thing. So I'd like to bring up everyone else and get into it. So I'd like to introduce Jason White. So Jason White. Jason was CMO of Beats by Dre, has a long history in the space of music and brands. He's one of the masters of that space. Many years working in like China for Nike. I mean, he's the real deal. So he's got a great perspective, especially all the work that Beats has done over the years in music. And Jay has now moved on to a cannabis company called Curacan. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with that and infusing potential like lifestyle and music and culture. My other guest here is Bun B, legendary Houston rapper. Is that good? Sorry. Bun is a longtime friend of mine. He has been a big face of the FADER and really reps the culture that we love at FADER of diversity and trying new things, and really has been an amazing friend and colleague over the years, so really proud. I actually posted a picture from here last year on Instagram of the mountains, and he saw it, and he's like, I want in on that. So we made good. And then I'd also like to introduce Rollie Pemberton, who also goes by Cadence Weapon, and he is an artist. He is from the Edmonton area, but makes his way in Toronto right now. So welcome to the stage, all you guys. The one thing I wanted to talk about just real quickly, and then I'm gonna kick it over to these guys, is one of my favorite recent examples of brands and music and how it can all come together. I don't know if people are familiar with the No Commission platform that Swizz Beatz started in partnership with Bacardi. So Swizz, who's a huge art collector and patron of art, wanted to really help an underserved community of artists that get exploited through gallery sales and taking huge commissions out of the work that they're creating, and really be able to give that money, holistically and all in to the artist. So what they set up was this kind of traveling. It's been in London. It was at Art Basel this year, curating all of these artists, letting them display their work, using his relationships within the music space, artists like Alicia Keys, and doing these surprise performances where it's gathering an audience. So the audience is getting an incredible experience, seeing these amazing performers. They're also there being able to look at all the artwork, and Bacardi provides alcohol for everyone to pay more for the art, and everyone really goes home and wins. So Swizz put $3 million last year back into artists' pockets, which is incredible if you really think about that. Bacardi's brand was up 30% in favorability and brand love through the course of this program. These kids get to see art, like it's an ecosystem that is really doing an incredible thing, and it's highlighting work from artists that are in underappreciated and underserved communities. And I think it's just a really good, holistic program where there was a problem. And I think this is something we talked about a little bit before we got on, but I think it's identifying like a problem And then how can you, as the artist, as the brand, come together and provide some solutions? So I think we're just going to open it up, to these guys who each probably have some stuff that they could share along those lines. And and then we'll open up to questions later on. So I don't know if Jay, you want to kick it off?
So I'm 2 weeks into the cannabis business and a month out of the beats business. So I'm going to talk with some degree of accuracy about the beats business, but disclaimer, I no longer work for Beats. But I ran that business for almost 3 years, and I think this is a very special topic for me because I never could actually crack a social good strategy for Beats. I never really got it right, and it was very important to me to try to get it right. And what I realized in that journey and in that process is there's very different ways where you can sort of achieve that outcome without actually saying, this is our social good strategy. I think about it as you can be a spotlight or you can be a sponge. And as a spotlight, there's moments in time where you take money, effort, talent, resource, and you make something louder. But then there's also be a sponge where you're constantly there showing up and showing up. And I think what Dre, Jimmy, the brand did very, very well was the latter, was be a sponge. How we get behind new artists, how we continually platform them, how we make sure, every Friday we're pushing out new artists. We just started working with Steve Stout and United Masters. Like, how do we make sure unsigned artists are getting an opportunity to have a voice? So there's all these other ways you can elevate and promote and push that are tied to what you stand for and what you do every day versus here's our social good strategy or here's the thing we did, last night on the Grammys. And there are moments in time for both, and both can be very effective. I think what happened with This Is America, what happened with 444, like those were spotlight moments. But I think we ended up being much more successful as a sponge, and that's what I'm taking into the cannabis space. And I've already kind of laid out some ideas for a much more of a sponge type role in the industry.
So you're saying it's really the brand having the right mentality in the first place.
Exactly.
And then operating from that.
Yeah, and stitching it into kind of who you are.
Right. Cool. Mr. Bun B.
Well, as an entertainer, we're already looked at as being like selfish people and that we're kind of all about ourselves. So as an artist, we felt that the way that we could separate ourselves from the way that everyone looked at everyone else compared to the way they looked at us was by association. We wanted to make sure that we were always associated with people who were concerned about the state of the community, about wanting to give back to the community, and that's how we kind of chose who we would decide to partner with. I think one of the better relationships that we were able to form was with Boost Mobile. Boost Mobile had a very good understanding of the fact that a lot of their clientele came from the inner cities, the poor people of the country, and they didn't want to seem as if all they did was take from these communities that were already lacking and already impoverished. So what they wanted to do was craft a campaign where they could bring an artist into their own community and give back directly to the community. So for me, I was like, well, the holidays is always the best time to do that. We see people do turkey drives all the time. No one really sees a corporation do a turkey drive. So that was the idea that we came up with Boost Mobiles. Let's go back into this community, and instead of trying to push a product on them, let's just give back. And if they see that there's a company that cares about their community, they're more likely to do business with that company than other companies. So we went back to my hometown of Port Arthur for Thanksgiving. We gave away pies, we gave away turkeys, and we didn't try to sell anybody any phones during those couple of days. And it really, really made a strong connection in the community, not only with the brand, but for myself as well. It sees, the community gets to see me in a way that tells them, hey, he's not just trying to take away from this community, he's also willing to give back to this community. Yep. And so when I became an independent artist and I wasn't necessarily dealing with a record company that could make those connections for us, I started to go out in the community and see, well, what can I do to change the perspective? So for me, I thought civic duty is a good way to change the perspective. So instead of just going into communities and trying to sell new music and sell merch, we were like, hey, on this day every year, we're gonna go into the hood and clean up the hood. Everybody's gonna come out, we're all gonna pick up all the trash, the cigarette butts, the Swisher roaches and all that kind of stuff, and we're gonna clean up this community. And that kind of grows into its own thing now. The community doesn't need me to be there when that day comes. It becomes a practice that they take on themselves.
Yeah.
And so Even with the food bank, every time we do an album release, we do events, and we tell people, you know, you can either pay to get in, or you can bring some food and something like that, some canned goods, something that, you know, doesn't perish, and get into the event for free. People are always receptive to a cheaper way of getting into something, and most people have a canned good in their home, so they don't necessarily have to go out and buy something. And you know, it's these very small initiatives let people see more of who you are as a person, not necessarily as an artist,
Sure.
and kind of, you know, give them a different outlook on entertainers as a whole. Like, hey, we're not all here just trying to get money so we can buy jewelry and big cars and nice houses. We actually care about the communities that care about us and want to let them know directly that, you know, we're here for them.
Yeah. Boost Mobile also did something around that same time that I thought was really cool. They did these park cleanups.
Yes.
Where you can get a ticket to a show to go see Jeezy, Bun B, Rick Ross. And I thought that was really interesting because people had to come out. I think they got Home Depot involved. They were cleaning up benches, painting things, like, and really helping restore these parks and areas in the local cities.
Yeah, volunteerism is a great way of getting people involved, and if they can get into, again, an event free for doing that, you'd be surprised what people would be willing to come out and help with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to talk about, actually, because
Cool.
Just this past December, I had the opportunity to play a show back in Edmonton that was sponsored by Sonic Radio. And they did a thing where if you did 10 hours of volunteer work, you got into the show for free. And it was a show of me and Death From Above and a few other bands. And I feel like those are the kind of events that I gravitate towards playing nowadays, you know, that have some other kind of like social component to them as well. You know, just as an artist, it's like the brands and things like that you associate with, they have to be aligned with your personal brand, you know? And it's like, I never want to work with anybody who makes maybe like a negative product, you know, that I consider to be negative, right? You know, so I think a recent example of this that I think is really groundbreaking is something that Frank Ocean did around the midterm elections, where he did a thing where in certain cities where, you know, there were certain people that he was pulling for, basically to get people out to vote. If you bring in your voting stub to certain like local clothing stores, he had some exclusive Frank Ocean merch that you got for free. And that really worked big time. There were like lines, they ran out of shirts, and it really engaged people in the voting process, you know? And it's like, I feel like musicians, we can get more and more creative in how we can, you know, sort of parlay our social media followings or things like that into, you know, actually doing some social good.
Yeah. I think, what do you guys think about politics? You know, I think the thing that I loved about what Frank did is that it was kind of agnostic. It wasn't saying, let's go knock Trump out of the office, even if he was thinking that, which I'm sure he was. I think it could be a dicey place, you know, for a brand to play.
I can jump on that one because, so I actually think Beats did this very, very well in the 18? That was 2018 election? No, 2016 election. We were launching a suite of wireless products. And the whole campaign used this Pinocchio thing, and then we used the Pinocchio song, I Got No Strings to Hold Me Down, and it was launching wireless, and it said, Got No Strings. And what we were trying to do was, how do we do something that, first and foremost, delivers a business objective, right? And actually pushes the concept of now everyone is moving to wireless. At the same time, though, how do we do something that is very genuinely going to contribute to what's going on in culture right now and speak to the importance of this election? And the line we came up with was, don't be a puppet. And it wasn't about vote for Trump, don't vote for Trump. It was just, don't be a puppet, because if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. You are now literally, you're being controlled by everyone else. Right. So that was how we moved into that space, and it was just about getting people to register to vote. It wasn't about anything other than that.
Yep.
And I thought that was a really nice play of how we sort of walked that line, but then still it laddered up to what we launched, which was wireless.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the thing. There has to be like a thread, because we're still all in the business of selling something. But it's about, in my opinion, it's selling something, but how are we doing that? Like, how are we selling this? How are we wrapping this? And what is it? What are all the components as it hits the world? Do you guys have thoughts on playing in politics? You know?
I've done it somewhat. Really, it starts out as educating people of the process, right? Getting people back involved with, for me, it was local politics, right? Because if you don't care about local politics, you're going to be indifferent about state politics, federal and national politics. So I just wanted to get people registered, get them informed, and get them engaged primarily. But once you start getting involved with politics, you're naturally going to be drawn to either one side or the other. And so you try not to incorporate your personal views in these settings so as you don't seem as you're trying to gear people or push people a certain way, especially when you're dealing with a brand, because then that brand gets thrown into that as well. And if things don't go the way that everyone wants them to go, then there's backlash for all of that kind of stuff. And brands want to be, on the right side of history for the most part, but brand still has to be profitable. And so, for me, the voting engagement, voter registration is a great thing to get people involved in. But when you actually start pushing people towards a certain way, like I got involved with the Beto push in Texas and sponsoring a fundraiser and getting Beto to come and speak. And it worked in the moment because it got people engaged, and he was a great candidate to get behind. But then from a corporate standpoint, now you've already cut ties with every company that isn't involved with that. And so when you do decide to get involved with politics, know that when you draw that line in the sand, you're going to leave a lot of other people on the other side of that line.
But I think artists are expected to do that. I think as a brand, it's about how neutral can you be in most instances.
But a lot of artists are
it's like,
brands.
what do you stand for?
That's the problem. A lot of artists are now becoming brands. You know what I'm saying? So even your social status and how you engage with the community is part of your brand, And there's a lot of people who aren't as educated in the process that want to throw their hat in the race and be like, well, we just need to vote this, but they don't have a really sound argument behind it. They don't have the information behind it. And so they come off, at the very least, awkward.
But do you think that a brand that is a human being, an artist, I get the sense that you are more expected to actually have a point of view and fall on one side or the other and be vocal about that. Whereas I think brands, just because of the understanding of Wall Street shareholders, all that, people are more forgiving of a brand that kind of remains neutral and finds the bigger cause to get behind, like register to vote versus vote for this one or vote for that one.
Well, I think that's fair,
like,
but you don't want to do that on someone else's dime. So when I work with other brands, you want to be careful not to bring your personal views and your personal politics to the table, because again, if that goes wrong, it affects the brand that you're working with. Well, what I do on my own personal time with my brand, where, like I'm sponsored by Monster Energy, I'm sponsored by Jordan Brand. So if I want to go off and do something like that, I don't wear my Monster hat and I don't wear my Jordans. Right. And I keep those personal choices separate from any professional choices that I make.
Yep. Have you had an experience working with any brands that you are passionate about, or,
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff with Red Bull. I feel like they're a really good example of like integrating with the music community in a way that's like not too obvious, but is really coming from a place where they really care about it. I mean, I actually interviewed Bun B for RBMA a couple years ago. But yeah, I've worked with them. I've done a lot of like hosting and narrating for Viceland. I've done stuff for Native Instruments. I mean, like, I try and, my one principle, my guiding principle for working with brands is like, is it something that I actually use? Sure. That's one of the things. I would never do something for like a cigarette company or like some vaping company, because I don't believe in that. But yeah, I think what you were saying before was kind of interesting though, just about artists' personal brands, because yes, I feel like there's a lot of like younger artists who are like, I stand for this thing and that's really important to me. But I think there's a lot of artists now who think of themselves as a brand first, artist second. Right. And they're looking at things like the classic quote I think of is, I don't know if it's apocryphal or if he actually said it, but Jordan being like, Republicans buy sneakers too. Right? It's like, you don't want to make that decision and then cut off half the people. Right. So, I don't know, something that people have to think about.
I mean, I think about Beats, for all intents and purposes, is a black brand owned by Apple, which is an everyone brand. And there were certain moments in time, like especially, I remember when like Philando Castile got shot, I was like, yo, we need to go and push heavy and be loud about this thing. It's like, well, hang on, like, you represent Apple. Right. You can't just go off half-cocked about a point of view because you're emotional in this moment or because this brand has to like represent that neighborhood or, it was a lot of navigating, a lot of taking the time to stop and think about it and understand all of the stakeholders involved.
Yeah, I think Bun makes a really interesting point too about when an artist works with a brand for a greater cause, when they're like off duty, and on their own Twitter spouting off about something or giving their more personal opinion, they do have to be conscious of the brands that they work with, you know. And I think that's like a tricky thing, and where we sit and what I do a lot of times is in the middle, you know, of that kind of situation, working with FADER, with the artists, with the brands, you know, for something. And a lot of times it's as simple as like, you know, just make sure if you're a Puma guy that you're wearing Pumas to the show, you know, like,
right.
and you know, we had an issue with a while ago with Meek Mill, who was a Puma artist, but just kept wanting to wear Jordans, you know, and we were just like, you know, I had to get on the phone with him and his manager directly, and like, they were just like, I'm like, why'd you guys do the deal then? You know, if you're, you know, so I think to your point, like, you really have to be passionate about the brands that you're working with, or really kind of, you know, be aligned with the brands that you're working with, because if not, like, it goes south really easy, and it starts looking at, like, you know, a transactional paycheck versus a longer term relationship.
And the audience can tell right away too. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, is like the audience is now so much savvier than any of us were growing up. Everything's more transparent. So like, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about threading that needle, because it could go so easily wrong now in the culture that we are, where brand does X, someone will find something wrong or something that brand did 15 years ago, you know, and try to poke holes in it. So, you know, Jay, I think for you as like, you know, on the brand side, like, how do you like kind of proof yourself against that?
You don't. And I like working for brands that have a point of view and that are edgy, that are out there. I spent 10 years in the Nike business. I used to run the Nike business globally for Wieden & Kennedy, Beats, some other clients that have been in those kind of spaces where you have to have a point of view. And I think the reason, or I should say the best way to handle it is actually to be very clear about what you stand for, and accept that it's going to be, one, be polarizing, and two, you're going to make mistakes. And, you know, when the whole sweatshop thing happened in the early 90s, I think that was, you know, that could have sunk Nike. But at the same time, you know, people knew what Nike stood for, and they were given a little room to recover, and how they handled it, you can debate one or the other. But I think every brand is going to have some of those mistakes, but the more you're clear on what they stand for, the more I think you're just like a human being. You're going to forgive that human being for the mistake they made, because you know generally they stand for this or they're a good person. And that's what we try to do with great brands. And I think that's what this conference is about. Sure. You know, Cult is about, or the gathering is about, you know, really truly having a following that understands you as a human being. Yep. And now I accept kind of the good and the bad of you, but I expect the good of you.
Sure. I think that is a great point about this conference too, is now being here, you know, second year, and seeing the consistent trends of conversation. And yesterday, you know, Joe Belliati had his panel with Tierney from Vans and an artist. And I think it's very encouraging to me now hearing all of this stuff, because it's not about, I need a sponsorship, I need a check. Mm-hmm. You know, everyone's kind of has a better mentality heading into these deals, and they're either going to do them because they believe in it or not. You know, and it's okay. Yeah,
I think as an artist, you know, you have to make sure that you're not doing a disservice to the brand that you want to go into business with, but then you also have to make sure that you're not doing a disservice to yourself. Right. So you have to be very careful about who you decide to even engage with in those kind of things. There's a lot of people that, you know, came with a good check and they say, hey man, we got a lot of money, got this great campaign, but like you said, you know, I don't want to be associated with your brand, because I don't even do that. Like, I don't even drink your liquor. Like, why would I want to promote your liquor? It tastes terrible. And then I'm going to put my name on it, and other people are going to drink it, and then when they see me, they're like, hey man, I love your music. Man, that liquor was terrible. You know? And you have to keep your own personal brand integrity.
I was actually going to ask you about that, because back in the day, a lot of the rappers, they were doing like the St. Ides commercials. I don't know if you ever did any of those.
No. For me, there was these liquor brands that started, like the Hypnotics and all of that. And they started to actually give artists their own liquor. I remember I went to a party Pharrell had a liquor called Cream.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. Like it was really bad, but it was presented so well, right? The packaging on it, the branding on it, the fact that Pharrell was connected to it. So when they came to Houston and had their party, I was like, I'm going to try that. It's got to be good. And I was like, well, obviously he's got a great ear for talent, but he's got a terrible taste for liquor, you know? And so that's the one thing I didn't want to ever have myself associated with anything that just did not represent me or just was not really a great product. Because people will put a lot more money into marketing than they will into the product development.
Right.
Just to take advantage of a certain demographic or to try to get, catch the wave, as people would say, just catch somebody's wave in that moment.
Yeah.
And you got to be smart about whether or not you want to connect to that.
Yeah.
And
Wait, full disclosure, we did Cream. So that was, we did that deal with Pharrell.
Oh, wow.
That's why I'm like, is this being recorded? There you go. But I swear, the conversations we had when we were trying this shit, that's a whole nother panel.
So, but can I bring that full circle, because I worked very closely with Pharrell at Beats, and to see where he's gone as an artist and as a human being now, like he's in every conversation, and he actually was a part of how we launched Got No Strings, how we did that wireless campaign, and he was like, very clear about which product he liked, why he was going to use it, why he was going to wear it, which piece of the campaign he would be a part of, which ones he would not, and like what we had to be a part of in order for him to be a part of it. So to see the growth of somebody.
Well, maybe he just likes a fruity type of drink, right?
No, here's the niche that we were going for. The female lactose intolerant drinker that needed something sweet to drink that didn't have dairy.
That's a Pharrell fan. Right? That's a Pharrell
Fact,
fan.
right?
So you can't make some of the shit up. But
Can I ask these guys a question?
Yeah, sure.
Are you going?
Wait, last thing.
No,
this is off of what you just said. It's so funny because I think that we just encapsulated, I think, a lot of what this whole talk is even about. Because when we did the thing with Pharrell and Cream and Diageo, probably 8 or 9 years ago now at this point, that was a product to sell, right? Now you have Pharrell, like one of the examples I shared with you guys, like you have now Pharrell doing G-Star jeans made out of ocean recycled plastic. Like that's another one where you talk about from a sustainability and earth. So look at the progression that he's also been at the forefront of. I think it's such a different conversation now. Thankfully, than it used to be, where it was much more about product. It was like artist product, smash it together and sell it.
And it was in the earlier days of hip hop learning its power as an endorser, right? Learning how much of the culture had been, spread into advertising and how everyone wanted that hip-hop edge kind of associated with their product, and they were willing to put a lot of money behind it. He's not the only person that's done it. I've had made the mistake of being on the Zune side as opposed to the iPod, right? Because I thought it'd be great to have that relationship with Microsoft, and it was still in the early days, so you didn't know if it could go one way or if everybody was going to have a different device. But that particular partnership didn't work, but it still allowed me to be able to have a situation with a brand like Microsoft where maybe we could find a certain way to make a connection that made more sense. But they tried, and this is funny because this was literally in the earliest days of social media. And so they gave me a laptop, they gave me a still camera, and they gave me a video camera. And they were like, look, just record everything you're doing, take pictures of everything you're doing, and send it to us, and we're going to put it on this thing called Facebook. And you're going to be able to, everybody's going to be able to see what it was. But I had no idea what it was, and I didn't embrace it. And so that basically killed the whole partnership. It was like, okay, well, you're not forward thinking enough for where we're trying to go. It was maybe why you didn't get the Zune. I was like, you guys aren't as forward thinking as you think you are.
Jay, you had a question for you.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell my story first. But the question I wanted to ask you guys is, in thinking about this conversation, I was kind of doing some reading and looking historically, and one of the things I found that I loved was Aretha Franklin used to have a condition in her contract that she would not perform for segregated venues, right? And I started thinking about, like, when do you fall on a sword, or when have you actually really said no, and whether it's your brand, whether it's your money, whatever, like, where you've really said no. But I wanted to ask you guys this, and I wanted to make sure I could actually answer the question myself. But for me, it was when I was in Wyden and Kennedy in the Shanghai office. I went back to China to run that office in 2011-ish. And we had a client who will remain nameless, as an auto client. My first week back, I flew to a city called Changsha, so you can probably figure out who the client is if you know China. And I saw a man speak to a room full of Chinese people so disrespectfully. I was blown away the way he treated these people, right? And this guy was a Westerner. And the line that we had said was the reason why Wieden and Kennedy was going to be in China was do good things for China. That was what we said. We are here to do good things for China, and we will stand by that. I flew back to Shanghai. Excuse me. I called Dan Wieden and I said, I need to fire X client. And they were like, well, you're already in the hole. That's why you're out there, to fix things. Right. And I said, trust me, I have to fire this client. And fired that client, told that client. Next day, told the agency. We then went on a mission, won Agency of the Year, built the morale back, and created a company that understood what we stood for again, right? So I'm curious, from your point of view, when have you been in that moment and had to make the real tough decision?
For me, it was deciding whether or not I wanted to continue to be a part of the record company system, right? Where so many artists are getting manipulated. And I think it was the incorporation of the 360 deal, where they were trying to push. Basically, the 360 deal is where a record company basically is involved in everything that you're doing. So if you're selling T-shirts, the record company gets a piece of the T-shirts. If you're, selling hats or, any kind of corporate sponsorship that you bring to the table or they bring to the table, they're getting a piece of it. And it just didn't seem fair that an artist using his brand, making his connection in the space where, okay, the fan base was like, okay, well, you know what? You got a really good taste in fashion. So if you decide to sell fashion, we want to buy the fashion that you're selling, which has nothing to do with the record company, but then the record company gets a piece of it. And so, but they weren't really, young artists weren't really educated as to how much of a value that they could have of themselves without having a record company built into it. When you're young and impressionable, you just want the record deal. And the record deal is, for a lot of artists, the end of it. Like, okay, now everything's gonna happen for me. And you don't realize until you get into the industry that it's really the beginning. And that's when the wheels really start turning. And for me, it was like, you know what? I don't even want to really be a part of a system that's still engaging with that. So when it came time for me to renegotiate and go back in and do another deal, I was like, you know what? We'll just do it independently so that everything we do reflects on us, and that we're going to be counter the system, then we need to take ourselves out of the system and show artists that you can still be profitable as an artist, selling music independently, or you don't need a record company to distribute you. You don't even need radio stations to play you anymore nowadays. And that's another situation. We have a situation in Houston where there's a local artist that's been banned from the radio, but he's literally the most community-driven artist in the city. He's the one that's helping the people in the inner city. He's the one that anytime any kind of disaster happens, he's the main one that comes up for it. Yeah, and they, to this day, they still don't, want to play the music. They don't accept him. And I got to the point where, you know what? I just don't even want to be in bed with a business that doesn't acknowledge everything that he's doing, especially when you have the opportunity as a corporation to do the same thing with many more resources than he has, yet you neglect to step up to the table. Yeah. So, yeah, there's been a lot of times where, and that's going to be, for me, that's going to be a big deal, that I don't really necessarily work with this radio station anymore because it's part of a conglomerate. The word is going to get out to other cities and other stations that I'm not playing ball and I'm not kind of like ready to just, disregard everything that they're doing. But at the same time, as an elder statesman in hip hop, if someone's going to bite the bullet, I kind of have to be one of the people that does that. Like, I'm the guy, like you were saying, that there's certain people that are expected to move and carry themselves a certain way. So for me, if I sacrifice this, that's fine, but that also lets other artists know that you can still have a viable career without having to kowtow to whatever other people are doing that you don't stand and agree with.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, that's cool, like leading by example, I had an opportunity to work with an alcohol company where they wanted to throw a bunch of money at me for all these like social media posts, doing all this stuff. And I, at the time, it would have been like a lot of money for me. But because of the brand and what they were doing and like their image and the whole thing, I was just like, I just wouldn't have been able to, even though those things, they go away, right? Like, it's like, yeah, you could just like post it now. It's like people forget about it, whatever. But it's like, I won't forget about it.
Yeah.
I will know. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you have to have a filter.
And it's like, yeah, I just had to make the decision just not to do it. You
Yeah.
know? And I still feel okay about it today.
Yeah. I think brands also have to understand, on their side of it and what they're getting into. We had a liquor brand that was hammering us to try to get Kendrick, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, guys, he doesn't drink.
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
Right.
Like, Kendrick's going to sponsor an alcohol and he doesn't drink alcohol? Yeah, I think, I know we only have about 5 minutes left, so I don't know if we wanted to open it up for some questions.
Oh, you're in the danger zone.
Yeah, man.
It's behind it. Yeah, he's gonna.
You got to loop that.
Yeah, it's like in your chair legs. So as soon as you got up, you would have been dragging that chair.
Thanks. Can't take me anywhere.
I didn't want to do you like that.
Yeah.
There we go.
This question's for Bun. I know you're super active on Instagram, especially with the live aspect. How do you feel Instagram Live has adapted and changed and let you interact with fans real time? And where do you find the importance in that in the kind of day and age of social media?
Well, I think when you use the live component, right, you can't Photoshop it, you can't doctor it, right? So you're kind of in the moment. Now you can kind of decide the space in which you want to create this live video, and you can doctor that. But for the most part, it's an unfiltered look at the person, right? And if you're trying to post a certain video and you can record it, doesn't sound right, doesn't come off right, you can try it again, do it again until you get it right. Live doesn't offer you that. So you're kind of in the moment with people, and it's not going to go perfect every time. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it. You get to show yourself with whatever flaws, and if you're not very well spoken, then that's going to come out. And if you're doing suspect shit, that's going to come out as well. But I think the best part about live is the fact that you can just, if you want to talk to someone that you don't know at all, then you can do that. That's, for me, has been the best part about it. We were in the Bahamas, and my wife was like, people always send requests to talk. Now, I don't know what guys, most of them are rappers, I want to spit some bars for you, something like that. And my wife was like, yo, just talk to somebody. Just talk to somebody. She's like, they'll probably be so caught off guard that you talk to them that whatever they thought they were going to do won't even happen. And that's what happens. Dudes will be like, yo, I want to spit some bars for you. Then I put them on live, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you just put me on. And I'm like, yo, you want to spit something? I don't even have the music. I'm at work right now. I'm just talking. But it creates a very genuine moment, right? And I think that's the best thing that an artist can do with their social media is create as much authenticity and create as many genuine moments for the people that follow you and look at you as possible, and make yourself more personable to people. That's been the key for me, is to just kind of level the playing field. And for social media, I've been able to do that. It's been able to show that I'm a father, that I'm a grandfather, that I like to eat, that I smoke trees, that, we like to go out to national parks and freeze our butts off like we did yesterday. Yeah. And, but I think it works. I think it works if you're trying to make a genuine connection with people. I think if you're trying to create a perceived notion of who you are, eventually it's going to backfire on you, because you can't control real-time experiences sometimes, depending on where you are.
Cool.
I have a question for you, Jason. You're getting brand new into weed in terms of music. Can you give us a bit of a tease? I apologize. Cannabis. Can you give us a bit of a tease of like how you're approaching music in a brand new business venture? I mean, basically, I'm really excited to see how you're going to incorporate that. It seems like a really exciting direction.
He's going to hire me.
Yeah, he is. Hire me too.
We're talking. Without revealing everything, first of all, the connection is there. We all know that, right? It's been there forever, especially in certain genres like hip hop. So I think, what I'm doing right now is looking at not just the Select brand, but the entire portfolio strategy of Cura. But I think when we look at a brand like Select, there's a lot that will connect into the creation of music, not just the celebration of music. So how do you take a more leadership role in that space, not just put your logo on stuff? You know, there's so many brands that are racing in to sponsor, like CBD this, CBD that. But if you can be of the culture and if you can make have the kind of relationships and provide something back rather than just money, that's the difference. And now you can actually build with people. And I think that's not something you can go work at a CBD company and say, this is my strategy, and then you show up and you do that. You have to have been there. You have to have built those relationships. You have to have the trust and the commitment and already shown that track record. And I think that's what a lot of folks who we were actually just talking about have kind of said, when you're ready, let's go. Yeah. So it's going to be about how do you really, truly be a part of the community, not how do you now be the 900th CBD brand to go sponsor the community.
Yeah, and I think just on that, I think that's what we're kind of talking about here is like how to, like doing good, you know, and those things. It doesn't have to be for a charity organization. It could be providing studio time for musicians. It could be doing food drives. It could be sustainability. Like Rollie was talking about, it could be brands like Red Bull giving him an opportunity to have like access to a studio and doing interviews and media. I think that's what we look at when we're trying to put these types of integrated deals together is like what's the give back, you know, and what makes sense to give back as part of these different brands and their communities. And it's going to be different, you know, for every brand and every artist.
Hey, sorry. Oh. Sorry. I know that recently, with like Big Crit and other rappers have come out and said, you know, major labels have kind of been taking some heat for some of the contracts that they're signing for their artists. How is that relationship changing when it comes to working with labels and your brand and how you're going to be treated and other things like that?
I think it's about understanding your value in the space, right? It's about knowing that you're worth more than they're offering and then having a counter plan in case you decide not to go down that route. And then that's where you start really putting in the equity of blood, sweat, and tears into yourself. People know when a contract is bad. They know that as an artist. I knew when I was young that my contract probably wasn't the best deal for me at the time, but I just wanted to be signed, right? I just wanted to be a part of the culture. And in the earliest days of hip hop, your only way to get your message to the people was through the record companies and through the radio stations. And now the dynamic has changed. There's so many different ways that an artist can get his music to people through streaming services, through social media, through YouTube, you know, all these different ways that you can get your music out to people, to connect with people. So now more artists now are actually coming into hip hop with a good sense of what their value is based on the interaction that they have, the views that they get, the likes that they got. People already like me, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. People are already into what, people are riding this wave. So you're either gonna pay me what I feel I'm worth, or I'm gonna go do it myself. And there are options now. The artist has more power in the industry than they've ever had before, and they understand it now.
And I also think, just to add on to that, signing to a record deal today in 2019, it's like, you have to make a cost-benefit analysis for that. You gotta be like, how much are they going to improve my standing as an artist versus how much am I going to add to their cultural cachet of their label or whatever?
Absolutely.
Know? Yeah.
And their bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I think we are out of time. Yeah? All right, thank you, everybody. This is great.